Welcome to our webinar, everyone. I'm Chetan Jotwani, Value Manager at Workday. And the Workday Value Management practice is a team of business consultants that partner with organizations to identify and evaluate the business outcomes that they can expect as they embark on their technology enabled transformation journeys. Now, while my own journey at Workday began 2.5 years ago, or just over that, my overall experience has been in supporting technology enabled transformations as part of system integrators, consulting organizations, as well as solution providers. And I'm really pleased today to have Vikrant join us to bring his views and experiences on the topic for today. Welcome, Vikrant.
Hi, Chetan. Thank you for having me. It's a pleasure to be doing this webinar alongside Workday. Hi, everyone. My name is Vikrant Khanna. I head up the advisory function for Alight Solutions in Asia. I've spent about a decade with the organization now, and I've spent most of my time advising customers on a range of issues on HR effectiveness and adoption of technology. Um, I'm also one of the co-authors of the State of HR Transformation Study, which is now in its fourth edition in 2021 and has become one of the largest studies of its kind in the region. I spend most of my time working with customers who are undergoing their deployment journey on Workday, trying to help them maximize the impact and the adoption on the platform.
Great. Thanks for joining us today, Vikrant. So 2020 has become quite a watershed moment for us all, given the uncertainties that ensue even as we're getting close to the end of this year. But we've also seen a lot of positives that have come up in the way businesses have responded. And digital has really been at the forefront of all of those as a key enabler. But this hasn't been an easy journey for organizations and business leaders as well. Workday recently commissioned a pan APAC study of C-level executives and business leaders, along with IDC, focusing on the impact of digital transformation or the focus on digital transformation. And the results that we found were quite interesting. Digital transformation is seen as a priority for an overwhelming 97% of C-level executives in ASEAN is what we found. However, you would think that with that amount of focus, there would be a lot of success that organizations are seeing. But what we found from the study was actually quite different. We found that despite the 97% of the executives focusing on digital transformation, 73% of these executives said that they were struggling to realign their organizational structures and to drive change to adjust to the new situation. Also, 82% of these C-level executives mentioned that they were not able to adapt their business processes in response to COVID-19 and really cited the lack of agility as a key reason behind that. So at this point, Vikrant, I'd just like to bring you in. We've seen some interesting results from our Digital Agility Index study. As a leader in the HR advisory space, what are some of the trends that Alight are seeing in the market?
Thanks, Chetan. So you're very right in saying that investments in digital are actually taking a lot of limelight, but that's symptomatic. If one scratches the surface and looks beyond it, organizations today are struggling to pivot their business models to the new reality that we're in. What that means is that they need to be able to precisely know what are the skills that they have and how best do they deploy them. They need to have the flexibility to reshape organization structure and processes in a way which suit the new business models. And what we are seeing is that HR is leading that space today. And I think if there was anything, the pandemic has really put HR more in the spotlight, more critical decisions around, when do we open our offices? How do we bring back our workforce safely? How do we enable remote working? All of this has really put a big spotlight on HR. So, in a sense, the investments on digital will increase, but they are tied very closely to specific outcomes around either we want to pivot to new business models, we want to really reshape the way our employees experience today, or it could just be around keeping up with the pace of disruption that's happening around us. So it's really put a lot of focus on the outcomes, I would say, rather than just the investment in digital.
Right. That's interesting because you mentioned some really strong drivers for transformation. You know, Traditionally we used to see that when it came to transformation, many businesses would have thought of HR as a lower priority compared to maybe some of the more customer facing initiatives. So I'm hearing from you that you're seeing a change in that, especially now that we're talking about the new ways of working.
Yes, absolutely. And if one reflects at the last 8 months that we've lived through, if there is one thing, Chetan, which has come to the forefront is that this is a people crisis. And as organizations respond, as organizations recover, and as organizations thrive in the new way of work that we will all hopefully get into, people will continue to be at the core of things. What it has done, however, Chetan, is that investments which are coming into any part of the business, it's not just HR alone. It's put a very sharp focus that any future investment which goes in needs to be um, tied in with very clear return on investment. It should have a direct impact, and that impact in the case of HR can be across a plethora of things. It can be an impact on making processes more agile, more simple. It can be an impact on driving more productivity on employees and HR itself, or it could be an impact of making data available anytime, anywhere for people to take decisions.
So it sounds like organizations are realizing the criticality of transformation for HR, but the focus really is on what's the business outcome, what's the impact that they would be driving. So that's very interesting. Now, I'd just like to pivot a bit and ask you about the evolution of the role of HR. From the Workday Digital Agility Index, we saw that agility is a key objective and driver for transformation. How's that?
Hmm.
How are you seeing that translate on the HR side?
Yeah, yeah, you bring up a very good point, Chetan. So it's a common story which is emerging across all or most of the studies which are being done on HR. Alight very recently concluded a study of close to about 1,300 organizations in the Asia Pacific market, and we what we arrived at was that HR needs to be adaptable going forward. And adaptable has several meanings to it. Adaptable means that you're reading the sands ahead of the time and being ready to react to things. And as we pieced it together, what we zeroed in on was that successful HR organizations will have three distinct anchors on which they will focus. Now, these three distinct anchors, again, is a combination of a commitment to outcomes, and outcomes could be varied, right? It's not just outcomes for the business, it could be outcomes for your talent, it could be outcomes for community. But there's got to be a clear commitment that HR has to those outcomes. Whatever they design around those outcomes will be with a lens of adoption. And adoption cuts beyond experience because as you think of the programs which you're designing or the processes which you're designing, they'll usually have two or three distinct focus areas, right? There'll be a focus area of people, who are you designing it for? Practices, which is your process and how work gets done. There'll be a focus on the platform, on what are the tools and technology you will use, how will you take these programs to your customers. So adoption will be at the heart, and that adoption at heart philosophy will drive a lot of experience which you promise. The third thing is that HR will start using data and will use insights which are coming from as people adopt processes, as they adopt programs. They'll use that data to navigate to a brighter future, which is where the role of governance will become very important. And as we interviewed organizations and as we looked at data, what we found was that organizations which are focusing on these three areas of outcomes, adoption, and using governance well to navigate to the future, they're about 2.5 times more confident in achieving their talent strategy and business outcomes. And they're about 2 times more productive than organizations who are not focusing on these. So, in a nutshell, the value that HR brings and the value which successful HR organizations will bring will be that of adaptability.
We've spoken about the changing role of HR, also the metrics that they're now being measured on. Let's now try to focus maybe more on the digital change of the function, which you've alluded to a bit there, Vikrant. You'd
Mhm.
mentioned about changing operating models and measures of success. Based on those, how are you seeing HR technology strategy evolving, especially as organizations evaluate change going forward?
Hmm. Yeah, thanks for that question, Chetan. Now, particularly how the world has changed over the last 8 to 9 months, we're seeing a completely different view to technology evolve. And that view is very, we're seeing a very sharp focus coming in on the why of technology. Everyone knows what technology can do for you in HR, but the why is coming in the center. They're very keen to know that and articulate that what is it that this will do for my employees, for my managers, for my leaders, and for HR. So, how will it impact the way of working in the organization is really coming at the forefront. How will it drive the right experience? And experience comes across as a very broad word. If I was to simplify it and take a four description view of what experience is, how will it make things easy, supportive, personal, and informed for users? There's also the lens of the business, which is far more important. What is it that we are going to achieve out of our technology journey? How will the business gain? It could be in terms of productivity, it could be in terms of better visibility on data and the ability to track your workforce skills and capabilities. There's been a reset on relooking at some of these priorities. So that's really come to the focus. So as we look at technology strategy, the world is clearly moving away from best of breed, where it's basically a patchwork of multiple systems solving very discrete needs. We saw a trend starting 2017 that more and more organizations will want to put all of their systems related to HR onto a single platform. We expect to see a marked adoption of that trend. So, unification will be a key theme for the HR technology strategy going forward. And unification has a lot of advantages. The first and foremost advantage is that as you get onto platforms which are built for cloud, you have an experience which is native. It's not, you won't feel it like a patchwork. So it's a very consistent employee experience, regardless whether I'm applying for leave, whether I'm looking for new opportunities, whether I'm assessing my team. Then, as you look at HR, right, unification has advantages both in terms of the way you simplify your ways of working as well as the way you administer programs. You don't need to run multiple technologies. There's a single technology, which is hopefully, if selection is done well, is easy to maintain, has been configured well, and you can make changes with agility. As you think of leaders, they're taking confident decisions. Why are they taking confident decisions on the back of unification? Because you have a single source of data. You have the availability of that data in real time, and everything's available to you on a single view. So, unification will become really important as you think of it in the light of agility and adaptability that we just spoke of a little while back, Chetan.
Right. And that's a really good point about leaders, having the data all in one place that they can dive into and take confident decisions. Because we also spoke before about how those objectives are changed and those are really aligned to the business. So it sounds like, the demands on HR technology and even the associated change are, because of the strategy underneath have really, changing along with that. And with this change in strategy and the the different demands from the technology itself, I'm assuming that's had an impact on the decision making process as well. Could you describe a little bit about that also?
Yes, of course, Chetan. Organizations today are evaluating platforms for what they want to see, not what the platform wants to show them. And we are seeing that reflect very well on the way evaluation is being run, the way criteria are being set, the way scenarios are being used to really see, how will the platform, how will this technology work in a particular scenario. So I think it's it's a very marked shift where it's not a checklist on an RFP document anymore. Now, as you move towards getting in multiple people to look at a system to see whether it's meeting their needs, it's meeting their demands and the experience which they want to give. Organizations are focusing a lot on aligning the evaluation teams so that each and everyone speaks the same language. We've seen examples where organizations have gone ahead and really defined 3 or 4 very big anchor points on which they will evaluate a platform or a deployment partner, so to say. The most interesting shift that we've seen in the buying pattern, and the name of one of our customers comes to the fore, as we work with Bank Montreal, is the focus on purchasing a platform today, but keeping an eye on the future. I think that is very important. You're buying a platform. You want that platform to be able to meet your needs, not today, but even as you project things out 5 years or maybe 6 years into time ahead. So the focus on innovation, how well the platform is innovating, how well is their culture on innovation, what is their commitment to top class product development is really coming to the fore. I was talking about Bank Montreal, as they went through their evaluation journey, they almost took time to look at platforms around, what was their roadmap release promise, what actually came out in the release. And that was a key measure for them in identifying which platform is committed to innovation. Just like Workday publishes their roadmap on what new product features are coming, your customers are going to be smart enough and seeing what is the commitment that Workday has to innovation by matching what was promised with what was delivered. Last, but certainly more important, I think customers have started taking a total cost of ownership based view of systems. They are not just boxing themselves in the view of, this is the subscription fees I pay. As organizations have started using cloud, I think organizations as well as platforms have realized that there is a lot which goes into uh, maintaining systems, into administering programs and systems. So organizations tend to take a more holistic view on, not just how much am I paying for the system, but how much will I need to incur as expenses as I maintain the system. So that view of total cost of ownership is really coming up very strongly in the market these days. And to piece it all together, what you're seeing on your charts right now is a simplistic view of how organizations are allocating weights to different platform evaluation parameters as they go through their evaluation. So if you'll see, there's a huge deal of polarization happening towards the experience, the ability of platforms to demonstrate analytical capabilities, as well as the total cost of ownership that I was speaking about.
Great. So I just want to shift focus a little bit now and maybe focus on the execution part of the transformation. So, from your experience, what changes are you seeing as part of this process, especially thinking of areas such as governance, and have customer expectations changed from transformation partners such as Alight?
Oh, yes. I think expectations are certainly changing. And, if I talk a bit about execution and how I relate it to organizations which have really gone into their deployment journey very well, have emerged successfully, I think there are three or four very big things which have been lessons that we've learned. The first and foremost one, which I'll talk about, Chetan, is that, everyone on a platform journey, on any form of transformation initiative these days, whether it has digital, whether it doesn't, will talk about experience. It will be one of those top impact or top outcomes that you want to drive out of your investments. The second piece has been really around the ability of organizations to close gaps and really be ready for the cloud. Cloud helps you get a view of data anytime, anywhere, take decisions anytime, anywhere. And for that to happen, there are a lot of readiness elements that you need to close. It could be simple things like, having clarity on what are the data fields around an employee, an organization, or a job you want to capture. Today, platforms give you so much that you can capture around these three or four dimensions so that once the system goes live, you can get wonderful insights. One of our customers, Bank Shark, uh, they were really committed to cleaning up data, identifying what are the aspects on which they want to take decisions, and start capturing that data months before their deployment started. So they worked with us around readiness, and they really got focused in making sure that they're ready from a data perspective as they go live, right? Last but not the least has been the need for being disciplined on change management. The focus of change management is to drive adoption, is to really be that voice of uh, the users and making sure that users are heard for and what they've asked for is being delivered. And it also creates a sense of excitement. It enables the organization to move towards the newer ways of working. This needs the time and the commitment of senior HR leaders. They need to come in and be that face of a digital first deployment. So as we advise customers, we are very clear that senior HR leaders' time spent early on and through the journey is a direct proportionate measure of success.
Yeah, it's a great point, and the better the decisions you take up front, the more rewards you'll reap later. And I'd just like to maybe spend 1 minute on the data point that you mentioned, and the aspect of clean data is so important because also if you think of innovations such as machine learning, they are really working on the base of data that you have. So the cleaner the data, the better the outcomes from that. Great. So I think the next part, what I wanted to just focus on is, and I think you touched on this just now, it's transformation. It does not end with go live, like you said, and it really is a journey. And especially now with HR having to drive specific goals and the measures of success, these transformations are have a very different focus than they used to. I also just wanted to hear from your experience on working on such journeys and make it a bit more real for our audience with few more examples like you just shared. So starting with adoption and talking about keeping up with innovation, in today's environment, what are you seeing companies doing in terms of helping improve adoption? And what is the one tip perhaps you could provide companies to stay ahead or stay on top of the innovation curve?
Yeah, it's difficult to give one tip. Everything is so interconnected. But I'll take the examples of learnings that we've had. One of them which comes to mind is our recent deployment with one of the region's largest conglomerates. Um, they spend a lot of time in the harmonization of processes, and the reason they spend time harmonizing processes had multiple layers to that, Chetan. First and foremost layer was that it was a way of signaling in the new way of working, which will be simple, which will be effective, and which will be efficient. Their investment in cleaning up processes, in harmonizing processes, had a business view in mind, it had a user view in mind. And I think both of them are important to drive adoption. What it Once those processes are ready from a business lens perspective, it'll make absolute sense because those processes have the right control points, the right governance to give you the right insights and take the right decisions. From a user lens, you've heard them, you know what their pain points are, and you've solved for them. So they will want to, not want to, they will like it, they will love it, they will use it. So that focus on how digital you are in your thinking, how are you changing the ways of working becomes very important. If I think of, one of the lessons we picked up from our customer Gojek as they went through this deployment was they were very clear. We will try and automate processes and HR programs to whatever extent we can. Look at the powerful vision over there that they wanted to remove any lag which may happen due to processes getting stuck, either because of a manual intervention needed or some form of paperwork. And I'm talking about an organization which has very rapidly become uh, a decapod, so to say, in the ASEAN market. So for them, the ability to execute with speed, with agility, to really drive digital first was very important. So that became important. The some of the other customers, as I think of a leading bank, they had a leading bank out of the Americas. Their philosophy was to simplify and improve. So it wasn't just the fact that they had deployed the system very well and they had high levels of adoption. For them, it was how much more can we optimize? Can we further transform our processes even more so? Can we really use the system to transform the way HR works, make them more efficient, just eliminate all transactional activities away from HR BPs? And that came through in their vision of wanting to simplify and improve, simplify and improve. What does all of this have in common, Chip? What all of this has in common is that Go Live is not a celebration. Go Live is the beginning. Go Live is anxiety. Go Live is where the journey begins. It's on to you on what people do with the system and how you improve on it with insights and data which you get around the system.
Great. So, what I'm hearing is definitely celebrate at go live, but that's just the start of it. Don't think that's the end. When we work with organizations and they build their business cases, it's all dependent on if the adoption is not there, if the continuous innovation is not there, you're never going to see those benefits actually materialize. So some really good points there. So maybe I'll flip the question now and maybe ask you, what are some of the things you've seen from organizations that have succeeded in terms of the pitfalls that they might have avoided? And based on that, what advice would you share to other organizations who right now may be at the start of their journey?
Organizations that succeed have an ambition in their aspiration and humility in their execution. Uh, so as I'll unpeel that onion for you, Chetan, ambition in the ambitious aspiration talks to wanting to do more, wanting to push the limits of what you can achieve in terms of both business outcomes as well as the user experience which you want to give. It will need you to really challenge the way HR works. It will need you to rethink the HR operating model, and you need to be willing to doing that. How? we've always done things this way will only get you so far. You need to be able to willing to change. The other part is humility in execution. Once you've set that aspiration, there is no looking back. It will mean a lot of work in getting ready for your cloud journey. It will mean a lot of work in thinking through processes in a more simplified and a harmonized way. It will need you to rethink elements of data that you need to capture. It will need you to engage more and more with customers who will be using your system. The last piece, which comes around humility in execution, and it's been a marked shift as you know we've seen uh, technology evolve. That shift is, Chetan, that there was a time when technology was lagging HR thinking, where organizations wanted to do more, but the technology really wasn't there. Now, today, technology is leading on certain parts of the HR thinking. So I'll take up a very good example, right? One of the top priorities of organizations and leaders is that we want to have a enterprise wide view of capability. How What capabilities do we have in the organization? How rapidly can we deploy them? It could be on special projects or it could be on new business ideas. Today, if I look at the skills cloud, the talent marketplace that Workday has, it makes that vision come to reality. But how many HR organizations are proactively looking at these new world class product add ons, which Workday has brought through, and are rethinking that what do we need to do to be able to utilize talent marketplace and skill cloud to the fullest? So the technology is there. How humble will organizations be in realizing that there is a lot which needs to be done in the plumbing works to maximize the utilization of those technologies is important.
Great. And I'll remember that quote: ambition of aspiration and humility of execution. That's a good one. It balances both sides. And it's really great to hear that. And the innovation that Workday is bringing forward is allowing organizations such as Alight Solutions to present a new vision of the way to organizations, and then organizations taking them up, and actually HR organizations driving that change. So that's really great to hear. So I think thanks, Vikrant. I think we've covered quite a few topics, and really glad that you shared a lot. And it was really great to hear some of the stories as well, whether that was from Bangchak, Gojek, which is an organization that's gone through tremendous growth, as well as Bank Montreal.